Hello guys, how are you?
I'm Hardeep Singh. Welcome back to your own YouTube channel. IELTS updates and recent exams. For more updates related to recent IELTS exam writing test topics, listening, reading, practice test, and speaking, you can guesswork. Please, guys, participate in everyday listening and reading practice test to achieve your desired band score in your actual IELTS exam. Please hit the like and subscribe button. Press the bell icon for the upcoming notifications. Don't forget like, subscribe and share my YouTube channel and my Facebook page, IELTS updates and recent exams.
Part 1.
You will hear a telephone conversation about opening a bank account. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 7.
Expats Helpline, Terry Davies here. What can I do for you?
Hello, Terry. I've been in this country for a while, and I've just been offered a job in the city, so I think I'm going to need to open a bank account. I haven't had one before, so I'm wondering what papers I need.
Well, basically, you'll need to be able to prove to the bank that you're who you say you are and that you live where you say you do, okay?
Uh-huh.
And for some banks, at least, that means you'll have to show them 2 separate pieces of identity. So I'll run through the list if you like.
Yes, please.
Okay. I'll bring it up on the screen. Let's see. Here it is. Right. The first thing it says is a valid passport.
Mine's Australian.
Yes, that would be fine, of course. The next one is a driving license, and again, one from your country would be okay. Then that's followed by birth certificate. Oh, hang on, that's only if you're under 18.
Which I'm not.
Right, so not that then. But you can also show them a benefit book. For instance, if you're in ill health, or unemployed, or getting income support.
Yes, I could bring that. Or a letter from my employer, maybe?
Well, that's not actually on the list, so we'll have to assume you can't.
Okay. And to prove where I live?
Again, there are several possible things listed here. For instance, you could use a bill for council tax, or something else for where you live, such as an insurance certificate.
I've got one of those, somewhere among all my papers. But what about bills? Things like phone bills, I mean.
As long as it has your address on it, yes, fine.
So a bill for my mobile would do, would it?
I'm afraid it would have to be for a fixed line phone. You could use other types of household bill, though, as long as you get them through the post.
How about an electricity bill? That'll say where I live, won't it?
If it's in your name and not that of a landlord, yes.
It is, so I'll probably take that then.
There's one other you might want to use, a vehicle registration document. If you have a car or motorbike or something, of course.
No, I haven't actually. Now, I believe there's a bank actually inside the commercial centre, and I might open an account there, seeing as how that's where I'll be every day.
Yeah, that would seem to make sense. I know people who bank there.
I actually read about it in a city guide. My cousin picked it up when he was here a couple of years ago, and I made a few notes. Do you mind if I run through them with you now, just to make sure the details haven't changed?
Fine, go ahead.
Okay, first question. It's still a branch of the Popular Bank, is it? The one with links to Australian banks?
No, it's actually been taken over by another big banking group, the Savings Bank. It still seems quite popular, though, especially with people doing business in the Asia-Pacific area.
And when is it open, Monday to Saturday?
I'll have to check their website for that. Give me a second or two, will you?
Sure.
Right. I've got it. Customer service, and it's just weekdays, I'm afraid.
Does it say what their business hours are?
I'm just looking for that. It's on a different page for some reason. I think there's been a change at some banks in the last year or so. Yeah, here it is. It's open from 9:30 in the morning till 3:30 in the afternoon.
And it's on the top floor of the main centre building, is it? Next to the travel agency?
That's where it used to be, but they've since moved it to a slightly bigger place. It's on the ground floor now.
Oh. And one last thing on this. I know most banks give incentives to young people to open accounts with them, but apparently this one didn't. Do you know if they're offering anything these days?
I'll just check. I'm sure they'd say so on their new clients page if they were. No, there's nothing mentioned here.
That's a pity. I was quite looking forward to getting my free gift.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 8 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 8 to 10.
There are plenty of other banks within walking distance, you know. It may be worth shopping around to see what they've got to offer. Longer opening hours, including Saturdays, perhaps less crowded.
Can you tell me how to get to a couple of them? I know where the commercial centre is, so that's probably my best starting place.
Sure. For the Royal Bank, you need to turn left when you leave the centre, go along Market Street past the post office, and turn left up Bridge Street past the Shaw Theatre. Then you take the first right. You'll see an internet cafe on the other side, and the Royal is just a bit further along on the right, directly opposite the Park Hotel.
Okay, I've got that. What about the Northern Bank?
For that one, you turn right as you come out of the centre and go along Market Street until you come to the junction with West Street. There you turn right again and carry on up as far as the next junction where you take a left. You'll see the bank from there. It's the third building on the right.
Fine. And the last one, the National Bank?
You can go either way from the centre, really. Up West Street or Bridge Street and then along past City Hall. The bank is on the other side of the road, right next to the tourist office. You can't miss it.
Great. Thanks a lot for your help.
Anytime. Bye.
Bye.
That is the end of part 1.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 2.
You will hear an extract from a talk about employment interviews. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 14. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 14.
Today I have with me Sandy Richardson of the local Workforce Center, and she'll be talking about that critical step towards the goal of employment, the interview. Sandy, what is an interview for, and what's the best way to approach it?
A job interview is simply a meeting between you and a potential employer to discuss your qualifications and see if there is a fit. The employer wants to verify what they know about you and talk about your qualifications. If you have been called for an interview, you can assume that the employer is interested in you. The employer has a need that you may be able to meet, so it's your goal to identify that need and convince the employer that you're the one for the job. As everyone knows, interviews can be stressful, but when you're well prepared, there's no reason to panic. Preparation is the key to success in a job search. and you can begin by collecting together all the documents you may need for the interview, such as extra copies of your resume, lists of references, and letters of recommendation. You could also take some work samples, selecting from what you have designed, drawn, or written, for instance. And make sure you have a pen and pad of paper for taking notes. The next step is to find out about the post. The more you know about the job, the employer, and the industry, the better prepared you will be to target your qualifications. Always request a job description from the employer and research employer profiles at the Chamber of Commerce or local library. You could also try to network with people who work for the company or with employees of companies associated with it. The next step is to match your qualifications to the requirements of the job. A good approach is to write out your qualifications along with the job requirements. Think about some standard interview questions and how you might respond. Most questions are designed to find out more about you, your qualifications, or to test your reactions in a given situation. If you don't have any experience or skills in a required area, think about how you might compensate for those deficiencies.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 15 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 15 to 20.
During an interview, it's important that you be yourself. Get a good night's sleep and plan your travel to be there in plenty of time so that you're not arriving out of breath with 30 seconds to spare. Don't, though, present yourself for the interview too early, 10 minutes at most. In the interview, listen carefully to each question asked. Take your time in responding and make sure your answers are positive. It's important to express a good attitude and show that you're willing to work, eager to learn, and are flexible. If you are unsure of a question, don't be afraid to ask for clarification. In fact, it's sometimes a good strategy to close a response with a question for the interviewer. In general, focus on your qualifications and look for opportunities to personalize the interview. Briefly answer questions with examples of how you responded in comparable situations, from either your life or previous job experiences. Something you should avoid are yes or no responses to questions, but don't dwell too long on non-job related topics. Use caution if you are questioned about your salary requirements. The best strategy is to avoid the question until you have been offered a job. Questions about salary asked before there is a job offer are usually screening questions that may eliminate you from consideration, so be warned. On the other hand, it isn't inappropriate to show your enthusiasm if your first impressions of the interview and of the employer are good ones. So, if the job sounds like what you are looking for, say so. Keep in mind that the interview is not over when you are asked if you have any questions. Come prepared to ask a couple of specific questions that again show your knowledge and interest in the job. Close the interview in the same friendly, positive manner in which you started. When the interview is over, leave promptly. Don't overstay your time. Think about the interview and learn from the experience. Evaluate the success and failures. The more you learn from the interview, the easier the next one will become. You'll become much more confident. To close, here are a few more tips. First, maintain good eye contact throughout the interview and be aware of nonverbal body language. Second, dress a step above what you would wear on the job. Go to the hairdressers, have a shave, etc. Remember that your appearance is a key indicator of whether you have the right attitude, so it can pay to give some thought to how you look. And finally, don't be a clock watcher.
That is the end of part 2.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 3.
You will hear a student and her tutor discussing her proposal for a presentation.
Right, Merle. You wanted to see me to get some feedback on your proposal and outline for your presentation. I've had a good look through now, and I've made a few notes about areas I feel you can improve. I must admit, when I first saw the topic you had chosen, I was a little worried.
Really?
Yes, well, it can be difficult to produce something fresh and interesting when you take on a topic like climate change. So much has already been written about it, and, well, it's not exactly original. But I have to say, I like the way you've approached the subject matter.
Thank you. Yes, I know it's a subject that has probably been chosen many times before, and that's why I decided to take a slightly different angle. I decided to base the presentation on an analysis of extreme weather and natural disasters over the last few years. There seems to be plenty of information on the topic, and I'll be able to include lots of visual material, photographs, graphs and so on.
Yes, I really like the idea, and you've produced a clear outline of the main points. Something I am a little concerned about, though, is the order you plan to use them in. I'm not sure it's entirely logical. I think that needs some rethinking.
Yes, I did wonder about that. Do you think the section on natural disasters should come later?
Yes, but that's not the only thing. Look, I've made some notes and suggested a possible order.
Yes, I see what you mean. I did wonder whether I needed to add a section about the recent flooding in parts of Europe.
Well, I think you should definitely mention it, but I'm not sure it needs its own section. What about including it in the introduction? In my opinion, the introduction is the weakest part. It needs much more substance.
Yes, I wasn't sure what to include.
Well, you need to grab your audience's attention at the start. And then you should include some background information on the topic and outline your main points.
And what's the best way of getting their attention?
Well, it could be a surprising or interesting fact, a picture or an anecdote.
Oh, I know. I found some fantastic pictures on the internet of the flooding. If I can find some statistics about it too, would that be a good way to start?
Absolutely. It will show the audience the relevance of your presentation and bring it right up to date. Remember to check the copyright and acknowledge your sources for any visual material you use.
Really? For pictures? I didn't realise I had to.
Yes, you should acknowledge all your sources in your bibliography and on your slides too.
Well, I've already started my bibliography.
Yes, I looked at that.
Is there a problem?
Not exactly. It's good to see you're taking a note of your sources, but there's so many of them, and I'm not sure about the validity of some of these internet sources.
How do you mean?
Well, take this graph you found about rainfall. Couldn't you find a more reliable source? This is taken from someone's blog. You need to make sure all your information is from trusted sources, academic papers, scientific journals, that sort of thing.
OK. And I need to cut the number of entries in my bibliography?
Only include the sources you actually use and refer to in your presentation. I would say no more than about 10 for this assignment.
Now answer questions 26 to 30.
OK, so you're happy with the organisation and content, plenty to work on there. Now, I believe you had some questions about the actual delivery of the presentation.
Yes. Well, it's more the technical side of things, really. I'm not very confident with the equipment, and I've never given a presentation before, so I'm really nervous.
Well, I think the best way to overcome your nerves is by preparing really thoroughly. Make sure you know the subject matter inside out, and that any visual aids and equipment are ready.
Yes, I wanted to ask about that. I'm getting a friend to help me put together the slides. Have you any advice about that?
The one thing I would say is don't put too much information on your slides, just the main points and any relevant visuals. You want your slides to support what you're saying. And I would also keep the slides themselves very simple, no fancy colours or animation that will distract the audience from what you're saying.
No sound effects then?
No, definitely not. And what you need to do is practice. You'll feel far more confident if you've run through it a few times with a friend.
My friend is going to listen to me run through it.
On the actual day of the presentation, there are a few important things to remember. First, think about where you stand. It's vital that you position yourself centrally and make eye contact with your whole audience. Don't forget the people sitting at the sides. If you smile and look friendly, it will make your audience feel relaxed too. And don't fidget and move around too much. It can be very distracting.
What about my slideshow? I'll need to be near the computer to move the slides forward.
Have you thought about using a wireless mouse or keyboard? That will really help. It means you can control the slideshow without having to move or turn your back on the audience every time you change slides.
That's a good idea. I hadn't thought of that.
The other thing to remember is that when we're nervous, we tend to speak more quickly. So make a real effort to speak calmly and clearly so that your audience understands you and doesn't feel rushed.
What about memorising the talk? A friend told me she did that for her presentation, but I don't think she did terribly well.
No, it's not a very good idea. It will make you sound unnatural. And don't read from a prepared speech because that will also affect the delivery and stop you making eye contact. Why don't you try using cue cards? You can include all the main points and any key facts or numbers as a memory aid. It will sound far more natural.
The other thing I'm a little worried about is questions from the audience. Should I answer them immediately or wait till the end?
The best thing to do is tell the audience in the introduction that you will answer their questions at the end of the presentation. That way you won't get any distracting interruptions. If you're not sure about the answer, ask the questioner to repeat the question. That will give you thinking time. You could always direct the question back to the questioner or the audience, asking them what they think.
Great. Oh, thanks for all your advice. It's been really helpful.
No problem. I'm looking forward to your presentation.
That is the end of part 3.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 4.
You will hear part of a lecture about text messaging. Good morning, everyone. I've been invited here today to talk a little about the research I've been doing into quite a modern form of communication, text messaging. I'm sure most of you here today will have already sent and received at least one text message today. It has become the most popular form of communication between friends and family, despite strong competition from social networking and email. We now send around 8 trillion text messages every year, which is amazing when you think that the first text message was only sent in 1992. Over half of British people now use a smartphone, and of those, over 92% choose texting as their preferred method of communication. And well over half of British people text every day, compared to only 47% who make a daily phone call. That's about 50 texts a week for the average person, which might sound a lot, but is comparatively few compared to other parts of the world. Unsurprisingly, it is young people who send the most texts. Amongst 18 to 25-year-olds, the average is 133 messages a week, which is more than double any other age group. And whilst 15% of the over 65s say they communicate by text on a daily basis, for the youngest age group, this figure rises to 9 out of 10. And it is this age group who prefer to message friends compared to the older generation whose main text recipients are family members. Apparently, men text more than women do and have a larger number of contacts that they regularly text, but they tend to be more functional in their texting and keep their texts short. Compare this to women who send fewer texts but are more likely to send long ones in which they cultivate friendships and relationships. More than half of women questioned are happy to discuss relationship issues and even express their love through a text message. For many of you, a time without text messaging might seem a dim and distant memory. In fact, it was back in December 1992 that the first ever text message was sent via the Vodafone telephone network, from a PC to a telephone. The message was a simple greeting, "Merry Christmas." The original idea was to use texting as a quick and easy way to communicate within a company, a bit like paging. In fact, it wasn't until 1994 that the first commercial text messaging service was introduced by a mobile network, and even then, consumer interest was very low. It was not until 1993 that the first text messaging service was launched in Sweden. A year later, Vodafone introduced texting to the UK. At first, texters were only able to text someone within the same network, and it wasn't until 1999 that there was full compatibility between mobile networks. At first, texting was quite a long and laborious task, as predictive texting was not introduced until 1995. Another characteristic of early texting was that each message had to be short, at 160 characters or fewer. This limitation on length is what spawned the common shorthand used by texters the world over. Abbreviations like BTW for by the way and TTYL for talk to you later have now entered the English language for good, whether we like them or not. Fears that this text speak would have an adverse effect on children's language skills have so far proven incorrect. In fact, a recent study has shown that children who are fluent in text messaging have higher than average literacy skills compared to those who don't text. In the early days, it would have been difficult to imagine what a versatile communication tool text messaging would become. Think about what you can use texting for. For my research, I asked a sample of people of all ages about the text messages they had sent and received on a given day. Apart from the normal social chit-chat, it was clear that our reliance on text messaging for everyday tasks is growing. In one day, respondents to my survey used texting to track a parcel being delivered, to vote on a TV talent show, to check the status of a plane, to give money to charity, to remind them of a dentist's appointment, to confirm a hotel booking, to enter a TV contest. The list goes on and on. Texting has also been responsible for spreading information and organizing revolutionary activity. And there have been numerous accounts of how text messaging has saved lives, including the doctor in a remote part of Africa who saved a child's life by following instructions sent by text. But let's not forget the downside to text messaging. This type of communication has also brought us cyberbullying and has added to the dangers on the road. There has been a notable increase in recent years of road traffic accidents caused by inattention by both drivers and pedestrians whilst texting. So what about the future? Well, with new ways of communicating appearing all the time, the future of the traditional text message seems uncertain. What is certain, though, is that the text message has made an indelible mark on modern communication.
That is the end of part 4.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
So guys, don't forget like, subscribe and share my YouTube channel and my Facebook page, IELTS updates and recent exams. For more updates related to recent IELTS exam writing test topics, listening, reading, practice test and speaking, you got guesswork. Please guys, participate in everyday new IELTS listening and reading practice tests to achieve your desired band score in your actual IELTS exam. For more IELTS material, visit my official website www.ieltsupdatesandrecentexams.com. The link is given below in the description. If you need PDF files of latest IELTS material, then please join my Telegram channel. So guys, please write your score below the comment section. Again, thanks for listening. God bless you all guys. Stay tuned, stay safe.